Hello, I'm Grim and welcome to Washer Dryer Episode 6, the Banjo-Kazooie cheat playthrough in which I, Grim Grindle, try to get as far as I can through Banjo-Kazooie as the Washer Dryer cheat transformation. It's probably never a great idea to start watching a series halfway through, and that is no more truer than for this episode here, because this is a part 2. Due to time constraints and upload schedules and other obligations and all that boring stuff that no one really cares to know or hear about, in the previous episode I ran out of time before getting to the end of Bubblegloop Swamp. And right off the bat, as we get into part 2, we immediately run into a slight issue. Or, more accurately, what potentially could be a slight issue in the future. You see, in the previous episode, I mentioned that the rubber boots were perhaps the most pointless ability in this washer-dryer challenge, as the washer-dryer, even without the boots, takes no damage from the swampy marshes. However, as I ran past them now, out of curiosity and because they were in my way, I ran into them and noticed that I didn't wear the boots. From what I already know from the previous episodes, I really should not have found this as a surprise, as anything that requires any custom animation past the very basic moves that the washer dryer does cannot really be done. This has caused issues on multiple occasions, especially when an item needs to be held above Banjo, or in this case the washer dryer's head, as the game seemingly, because the washer dryer doesn't have Banjo's animation, just simply doesn't do it. I had hoped that the boots would work in the washer dryer playthrough, as after all the jump pads and the fly pads work, but it definitely appears that they don't. But Grim, why is this an issue if the washer dryer doesn't take damage in the swamp, you might well ask? Well, rather simply, because if the rubber boots don't work, it's more than likely that the speed boots won't work either. And while not taking damage as a washer dryer when in swampy areas or presumably snowy areas means that the boots are pretty much pointless for the washer dryer challenge, it doesn't really help in situations where the washer dryer needs to move very fast. However, there is no mandatory speed challenges in this level, and Silent Panda has once again in the comments suggested a possible solution to this, so we'll jump that horse when we come to it. And so as we're treating that problem like a health issue and putting it off until the absolute last moment, until it quite literally can't be avoided, let's use Mumbo's magic to transform into a crocodile or alligator. I'm not sure which one it is, I'm not Bindi Irwin, I just know that it's a giant lizard native to the swamplands. That's right folks, it's like Shrek 2. You've all come here to see one thing, and yet for the bulk of the video it's going to be transformed into something completely different. They also both contain a swamp and have fairy tale style creatures, so essentially what I'm saying is welcome to Washer Dry Episode 6 Bubblegloop Swamp Part 2, subtitled It's Basically Shrek 2. Speaking of similarities with Shrek 2, who can possibly forget the Crocodile v Crocodile eating competition within a giant crocodile? And it is through this section that I've decided to speed up the footage a little bit, because, after all, I did really quite bad at this, and it took quite a long time, which is rather embarrassing because, of course, this is a transformation that is in the regular game, and so I have no real excuse at doing bad at it. Despite this lack of excuse, I found myself, in a very short amount of time, leaving the crocodile's crocodile with my crocodile head hung crocodile low. You see, each time Mr. Vile beats you, or as I found out, even when he draws with you, which is a load of bollocks, he takes the liberty of taking a little bit of a nip out of you. And after doing not too well a couple of times, I found myself plagued with a growing concern that I may very well actually be killed by these little love bites. Really not wanting to die, because that would mean finding all of the Jinjos and music notes again from the very beginning, I decided to head off in search for some honeycombs, and once gotten, return to Mr. Vile for some much needed vengeance. I will once again speed up this showdown with Croconaut, because unfortunately it wasn't the most economic of beatdowns. This time, while I did manage to get all the way to the third round, unfortunately in the third round I still lost the challenge. And by lost I mean drew, which I must reiterate is a total load of bollocks. And so, having disgraced my family name yet again, I tried to escape Mr. Vile's nipping, failed to do so, got nipped by Not Nipper, and prepared for yet another match with Crocodile Dundee's former jacket. Which I will, for a third time, speed up at least slightly, because even when you do well, the match still goes for 60 seconds. This time I did really quite well and gave Mr. Vile a total whooping. Although, knowing Banjo-Kazooie, I wouldn't be surprised if the game took pity on me and made it easier because it was tired of seeing me fail. You know, kind of like in Banjo-Tooie, when if you screw up enough times on the Sorcerer of Peril, it gives you nothing but blue targets. But I'm not complaining, pity regardless, I'll take my victories when I can get them, especially when it seems that I can't get them at all without said pity. And so with my pity jiggy received, I head out of the crocodile's crocodile in search of doing more crocodile activities. Although, this is where things all get a little bit screwy, because the best way to play Banjo-Kazooie is to try to streamline it in a way that you don't need to transform too many times, because backtracking all the way to Mumbo's hut is a pain in the bottom and really quite a bit of waste of time. Most levels, not all of them, but quite a few of them, can be achieved with only one transformation, which you should do last because then you can leave the game world as the transformation and often do things outside the actual level, still as whatever the level's transformation is. Although, as you would have just seen now, when I left the crocodile's crocodile, I saw that there was still a mechanical crocodile chomping around, which means that I hadn't yet completed all of the tasks that the washer-dryer had to do, and so I had to transform back into the washer-dryer, because otherwise I could not yet finish off the world as a crocodile and then leave to find Paigey. Interestingly, following this transformation, which should seem far more strange to me than it does, Mumbo still made the comment about making me into boots, which further shows that the game really does believe that the washer-dryer is actually a transformation, rather than it being just a reskin of Banjo. Regardless, having transformed back into the washer-dryer, I took the shortcut out of the maze, or more of the shortcut that avoids the maze entirely, if you can really call it a maze because in actuality there's only one pathway through it, and headed back to the reptilian Robocop to shoot some more eggs into its mouth. I always enjoy challenges like this in Banjo-Kazooie style games because they both encourage you to explore the map and reward you for doing so. By showing the little preview of where the object has disappeared to next, you'll either recognize it due to the partially visible landmark, or you'll have absolutely no idea where it is and have to go and find it. Either way, it's a really clever way that Rare's made you pay attention to what you're seeing, which is a really important thing to encourage early on, especially considering that, at the end of the game, well, you know what you get. And because the game does in fact force you to pay attention throughout it, when I actually got to the board game the first time, I had no trouble doing it because I had already been staring wide-eyed and eagerly engaging with every single thing that Rare had showed us. Although that said, as far as replayability goes, challenges like this are probably the least interesting because there's not really much point of a scavenger hunt if you've completely memorized every single bit of the entire game perfectly and know where the crocodile spawns next besides. That's not really a knock at the game though, because it gets easier after you've passed it 80 times is probably not the fairest of criticism, because if the game wasn't great, I wouldn't have played it so many times that challenges like this became easy. Although, speaking of things that should be easy after you've passed the game 80 times, let's get back to the complete train wreck that was my order in which I did my transformations. So, firstly, having revisited the turtle once more, hoping that having turned into the crocodile and turned back into the washer-dryer, it would trigger the actual challenge here, I was wondering that since Mumbo was confused about whether I was the transformation or not, maybe that was the issue here and just toggling back and forth would fix it. It did not. I headed back to Mumbo's hut to turn into the crocodile for the final time. Or so I thought. You see, having done so, it was straight to the swamp huts that are up on the pillars in order to get the final gettable music notes and the final Jinjo. However, rather unfortunately, upon arriving, I found out that it wasn't the final Jinjo, which meant, you guessed it, once done here, I have to go back and transform once more into the washer-dryer. But before I do so, I figured I might as well try something out before I transform back into Banjo, and so I headed back over to the Russian doll egg because I realized that while the washer-dryer's final attack didn't actually work to penetrate the egg, maybe the crocodile's attack would do the job because it is a regular attack in the game and so shouldn't face any hit detection issues. Unfortunately, this failed miserably, the egg stayed intact and so the Jiggy was not awarded. Which means that it was back to Mumbo's to transform into the washer-dryer for the fair actual last time, or at least the last time in this video. Also, during this transformation sequence, it's probably as good a time as any to say a big thank you to those of you that are giving advice in the comment section below. I am at this point in particular referring to those of you who made known to me that if you ground pound at the height of doing a backflip, it will add a little bit extra height to the washer-dryer. While I can't try it out in this video because while the audio is recorded on a different day than the previous episode, it is still the same video continuing on, I will definitely be utilizing that in any situation in which the washer-dryer cannot quite make the height. And of course, if I do find myself needing that final music note, I will return and use it here. Speaking of final, there's the final Jinjo frantically waving at me over at the other reed there, so I best get over there and grab him now. And now with he successfully rescued, that brings us to the 8th Jiggy gotten in Bubblegloop Swamp, which, due to the egg being unbreakable, and due to the music lesson being unteachable, is the maximum amount gettable in Bubblegloop Swamp during the washer-dryer challenge. Which, of course, means that we're pretty much done in this level, and so it's time to head back to Mumbo Jumbo once more, for the final time in this level, transform back into the crocodile, and head out of the game world in order to find Paigey. It figures that the time that I really screw up the transformation order was the one level in which you have to run through an annoyingly long labyrinth before you can even get to Mumbo's hut. Although, quite comically, even this simple task involved some really messed up transformation order, because once I transformed into the crocodile for what I assumed to be the very last time, I remembered that above me was where the final honeycomb piece was, and so, breaking my claim from earlier, I transformed back into the washer-dryer again, attempted to retrieve the honeycomb, which I failed to do so because it was just far too high for me. Perhaps I will have to return again and try to use the ground pound here, and then reverted back into my reptilian state. And so with that done, before I could partake in any further tomfoolery, I figured I should probably leave the game world post-haste and move rather swiftly over to Paigey. Fortunately, I had remembered the 6 Ps and broken the ice boulder before going into the level, which meant that my crocodile could just walk straight through the hole. And having done so, I crawled through the long corridor, and after a couple of twists and turns, I emerged to see Cheeto, who I mistakenly called Paigey earlier on in this video. I guess I've been playing too much ukulele. And so, as this handsome hardback helper gives me a cheat code that will come in handy later on, I think this is where we're going to end this episode. So, as always, thanks for watching, and until next time, I have been and still am Grim Grindle, and you've been watching Washer Dry Episode 6, Bubblegloop Swamp Part 2.